On the morning of September 11, 2001, 4 passenger airlines were hijacked by 19 terrorists. Two of these planes, American Airlines Flight 11 and United Airlines Flight 175, were deliberately crashed into the north and south towers of the World Trade Center in New York City, causing damage and loss of life. Another plane, American Airlines Flight 77, was flown into the Pentagon. The fourth plane, United Airlines Flight 93, crashed into a field in Pennsylvania after passengers attempted to regain control from the hijackers. Let's understand what actually happened on the day of 9/11 attacks. American Airlines Flight 11 was flying towards Los Angeles International Airport from Boston. Suddenly, 5 hijackers led by Mohammed Atta had hijacked the plane and took all the controls. After taking control, the plane's direction was changed to New York, towards the World Trade Center. The World Trade Center was the heart of New York. Those hijackers crashed the plane at the North Tower of the World Trade Center. During that time, the US President George Bush doubted that it was an attack. Some even suggested that it could have been caused by a pilot experiencing a severe heart attack.
Sir, it appears a small twin-engine prop plane crashed into one of the towers at the World Trade Center in New York City. Our collective response was, oh, what a horrible accident. The pilot must have had a heart attack or something.
Shortly thereafter, it was revealed that the Flight 175 had also been hijacked by 5 hijackers who took control of the plane. They directed the aircraft towards the South Tower of the World Trade Center and crashed it. The sequence of the attacks, first the North Tower and then the South Tower, shocked every individual in the US. President George Bush was visiting an elementary school in Florida. He was there to participate in a reading event with students. After the attacks on North and South Towers of the World Trade Center, President Bush was informed of the situation. He remained at the school for a short time to address the nation and consult with his advisors before departing for Air Force One. When all the people in the US were thinking about the reasons behind the crash, they heard news about 2 more planes that were hijacked. The third plane, American Airlines 77, which was flying from Washington, and the fourth plane, Flight 93 of United Airlines, which was flying from New Jersey, were rerouted to Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is the capital of the US. The third plane then crashed into Pentagon, which is the headquarters of the US Department of Defense. After the third crash, everyone, including the government, was in shock. They immediately closed all the airspace and instructed planes to land at the nearest airports. Parts of the Pentagon were damaged, and the World Trade Center towers caught fire, leading to their collapse. Now, the government was concerned about the fourth plane. This plane crashed into a field in Pennsylvania. It is believed that the passengers bravely fought against the hijackers, preventing the plane from reaching its intended target. Hats off to all these passengers. Due to their courage, there was no further loss. It is hard to even imagine the chaos and the fear that must have been felt by everyone involved that day. Nearly 3,000 people were killed in this attack, making it one of the deadliest terrorist attacks in the history. If we look at the casualties by crash sites, approximately 1,355 people died at the North Tower, 630 people died at the South Tower, 125 people died at the Pentagon, and 44 people died when the fourth plane crashed into a field in Shanksville. It was the darkest day in American and global history. No one has ever seen such a large-scale terrorist attack. Afterwards, the US has increased its intelligence efforts. They gathered information from various sources and identified that the members of Al-Qaeda were responsible for planning these attacks. To understand why Al-Qaeda has committed such a heinous act, we need to look back to 1996. Osama bin Laden declared war against the United States. He decided to oppose US due to a combination of political and ideological factors. One of the main reasons behind the 9/11 attacks was the presence of US military forces in the Middle East, particularly in countries like Saudi Arabia, which is home to Islam's holiest sites. Some extremist groups like Al-Qaeda saw the US military presence as invasion and occupation of Muslim lands, so they wanted to drive the American forces out. Another reason for the attack was the US support for Israel, especially in its conflict with Palestinians. Bin Laden criticized the US sanctions on Iraq after the Gulf War, which he believed were harming the Iraqi people. Bin Laden thought the sanctions were part of a bigger problem. He always thought the US is being mean to the Muslim countries. Al-Qaeda meticulously planned and orchestrated large-scale attacks on the US, intending to hijack planes and crash them into strategic sites including the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and potentially the Capitol building or the White House. These plans were based on intelligence reports and aimed to inflict maximum devastation and casualties. These targets were chosen on several factors, including potential impact, strategic value, and symbolism. The World Trade Center in New York City was selected because it was a symbol of American economic power and the global financial system. The Pentagon was chosen as a symbol of American military might and strategic importance. Al-Qaeda leaders Osama bin Laden and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed selected 19 individuals who were committed to the jihadist cause and willing to carry out suicide attacks. They received instructions in physical fitness, combat tactics, and weapon handling. They also received rudimentary flight training, including instructions on how to control an aircraft in flight. The training period likely lasted several months, with the hijackers receiving intense instruction from Al-Qaeda trainers. The hijackers then traveled to the US in small groups, using legal means such as tourist or student visas. They settled in various cities, including San Diego, Los Angeles, and New York, where they began to prepare for the attacks. These hijackers conducted extensive surveillance of their targets, including the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. They studied flight schedules, airport security procedures, and cockpit layouts to familiarize themselves with the operation of the aircraft. Some of these hijackers received further flight training at flight schools in the US. The hijackers' flight training in the United States was part of their overall preparation for the attacks, allowing them to gain the skills necessary to carry out their mission. On September 11, the four ringleaders and key operatives, Mohammed Atta, Marwan al-Sahi, Ziad, and Hani Hajor, along with other terrorists, split up and boarded separate flights. Mohammed Atta and some hijackers boarded the American Airlines Flight 11, which was scheduled to depart from Boston and fly to Los Angeles. Marwan al-Sahi and group boarded the United Airlines Flight 175, which was scheduled to depart from Boston and fly to Los Angeles. Ziad boarded American Airlines Flight 77, which was scheduled to depart from Washington and fly to Los Angeles. Hani Hajor boarded the United Airlines Flight 93, which was scheduled to depart from New Jersey and fly to San Francisco. Now, as I explained in the start of this video, these planes were crashed into World Trade Center and Pentagon. During the 9/11 attacks, many people were shocked, scared, and confused. When these hijacked planes were crashing into their targets, they couldn't believe what was happening. They saw the buildings on fire and watched on TV as the towers collapsed. Some heroes, like firefighters and police officers, rushed to help others, risking their lives to save people trapped in the buildings. Across the country, people watched the news in disbelief. 9/11 attacks has brought all Americans together. They volunteered to help, they donated the blood, and showed their support to people who were affected by this tragedy. The US intelligence agencies, including the CIA and FBI, has launched massive investigations to find the perpetrators of this attack. Using intelligence by intercepting communications, by interrogating some captured individuals, they were able to conclude that it was Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden who were responsible for this attack. In response to September 11 attacks, US took some immediate actions, both in terms of military retaliation and intelligence efforts. The US launched a military campaign in Afghanistan known as Operation Enduring Freedom. This is to dismantle the Al-Qaeda terrorist network and remove the Taliban regime, which had provided sanctuary to Al-Qaeda. The campaign involved airstrikes, ground operations, and support for the Afghan anti-Taliban forces. The US worked with the allies and international partners to build a coalition against terrorism. This included diplomatic efforts to gain support for military action in Afghanistan and cooperation in intelligence sharing, and law enforcement. Domestically, the US implemented significant security measures to prevent future attacks, including the creation of Department of Homeland Security, increased airport security measures, and the passage of the USA Patriot Act. Almost after 10 years, on May 2, 2011, Osama bin Laden was killed by the US Navy SEALs during a raid on his compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan. This raid, conducted by the US Navy SEALs, was authorized by then President Barack Obama based on the intelligence that the bin Laden was hiding in the compound. Bin Laden's death marked a significant milestone in the global fight against terrorism and the efforts to dismantle Al Qaeda.